Okay, so it's time for episode 2 of series 1 of the Back in My Day podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening to episode 1 with Richard. This one's with Sarah. Sarah grew up in Cornwall in the UK. She spent some time living in East Africa. She has ties to Queen Elizabeth II. She moved to Australia, and she even has a funny story about porridge. So yeah, absolutely love speaking to Sarah. She was fantastic, a real character, a real good sense of humour. So we hope you enjoy listening to this one. As always, please like and subscribe if you do like the podcast. Thanks.
I'm better with animals than I am human beings, probably.
What's your favourite?
I would never be able to pick one, and especially because they've all got such different personalities. In my room here, I've got one of the last dogs. We had 2 cats with the dog, and we had a guinea pig who thought he was a dog.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We always like to start at the beginning, if that's okay, and just ask where you were born and a little bit about your early years.
I was born in Cornwall, UK.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was educated in England.
Did you surf in Cornwall?
Not stand-up surfing. I was just one of those to lie on a board.
Right, okay.
Well, that's giving my age away too, because there weren't a lot of stand-ups in those days.
Right, okay.
Gosh, I never thought I'd say in those days. It's out now.
Do you remember a surf shop called Fat Willie's? Was that there when you were there?
I do remember that name.
It used to make me laugh as a child because people would suddenly walk around, they'd have a T-shirt that said Fat Willie's, and because it said Willie's when I was a kid, it was obviously very funny. And all the other kids thought that as well. But it was Fat Willie's surf shop in Cornwall.
How funny.
Yeah, I think it was very famous for a long time.
Yes, that does ring a bell. Although Newquay, where that would have been, became probably a touch overrun with madness.
Okay.
As my mother would say, it's rough as rats. Yes, Mum. She came out with some beauties, my mother.
So Cornwall was a fun place to grow up?
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm completely biased.
Right. As you should be, yeah.
I still adore it. I had no intention of living my life away. The reason I am still here is because my one and only son and 2 grandchildren are living here.
Right.
Well, I can hardly go to Cornwall.
So you're saying you would have gone back to Cornwall if it wasn't for a family?
Oh, yes.
Right. When did you move away from Cornwall?
I was coming up to 30, I think. But we only came, my husband then was a vet, and he was offered particularly good money to practice here for 3, anyway, it seems so long ago. So he also got itchy feet very badly. I mean, he was in East Africa for 5 years doing research on tick fever. He was a restless human being.
Like to move around?
Yes. And I didn't want to come to Australia. I felt that was just a touch too far.
It's pretty much as far as you can get, isn't it, from England?
Yes. And I'm still here because, of course, I've got a son and grandchildren.
So you came over at 30, and it was only meant to be temporary at that point?
Yes, it was going to be a 3-year contract for Frank. And we went home, but they paid him so well here. Came back again.
Was it hard to come back the second time?
Yes, yes. We had, first of all, intended not to come back here, but possibly go back to East Africa, which I didn't spend all the time there, you see. And that didn't feel so far, really.
So you were more comfortable in Africa?
It's difficult to answer honestly because of the time difference, and also because I didn't have long enough to get over the buzz of being there. I mean, it's a thrill to drive from Nairobi to Mombasa, for example. I loved it, and it's a thrill to see the animals as they are and not in cages.
Yeah.
I'm better with animals than I am human beings, probably.
Oh, really? What's your favourite?
I would never be able to pick one.
Yeah.
And especially because they've all got such different personalities. I mean, in my room here, I've got one of the lost dogs. We had 2 cats with the dog. And we had a guinea pig who thought he was a dog.
That's great.
Because they all got on.
I was about to ask that. Did they all get on? Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
I didn't think cats and dogs were meant to get on.
Nor guinea pigs.
Well, yeah, I hadn't put any thought to that, but now you say it.
Well, the funniest thing, because I was concerned about that, my son Richard brought Patchy back by small plane from staying with people in Canberra. And when we took the pilot back as well to after, when he brought the plane back to where we were. And he was shocked when he knew what the noise was, that it was a guinea pig sitting in this little 4-seater plane.
Wow.
And I said, what? And he said, they thought he was going to be put down, Mum. Oh, all right then. So what we ended up doing was actually having them all live together comfortably.
Yeah, that's great.
I was concerned about the guinea pig and the 2 cats that were quite young, really. And the funniest thing happened. I'm standing in the kitchen watching, letting them all go free. And the dog was all right because he thought he was above them all. So personality-wise, he was fine.
The cats are the troublemakers normally.
And they were. They went up. Patchy was out freely running in the garden. I put him in his nice big cage at night. And Patchy's sort of nibbling away at the grass. And one of the cats came up and got him at the back, and Patchy went, and then continued nibbling again. So the other cat thought, oh, this is funny.
Gave it a swipe.
So he did the swipe on the other side. And that's where it ended, because Patchy stopped nibbling grass and he turned around and he glared like this, those 2 cats. I've never seen anything like it, because the first one went like this.
Yeah.
And then the second one too, he's backing off and looking to make sure he wasn't being chased by the guinea pig.
So it's after the guinea pigs had it over all of them.
Everyone.
Yeah, well.
It's wonderful.
It's good to hear a story of a guinea pig standing up for itself. I like it.
Yes, and he did it with such style. And I like that.
Yeah, bit of character, bit of style.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
He wasn't a dull and boring old guinea pig.
Wasn't your average guinea pig. I've gotten here, in terms of your work, supplying English antique jewellery.
To the trade.
How was that?
It was good from a couple of reasons. One was that it meant that I was constantly having to go back because I bought it in England.
Oh, so you were doing that trip back and forth?
Yes.
Oh.
But I usually stopped in one country or another so I could have a couple of days off and sightsee and I got to know some people, and I was asked to work for some and asked to look after their child for another. Anyway, that's another story. That was one of the good things about it. Well, I suppose that meant everything, because I could go to and fro easily, comfortably.
That was the life that it gave you, doing that job.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
It was good. And I made enough money to treat myself each trip with stopping wherever was suitable and not wasting too much of the precious money on the way to or back and forth.
So you've seen a lot of places then?
Yes.
Any favourites? Any ones that stand out?
Cornwall, of course.
Yeah. When's the last
There
time?
were interesting things too, because I can remember Frank saying he was going to visit this English couple, Lake Victoria or somewhere. And at night, because he was staying the night, at night, Father dear got up, unlocked a cabinet and put a gun on his wife's knee and a gun on his own knee. Not a word was spoken. They just did it every night.
Right.
Probably because there was still trouble dealing with Kenyatta. And just generally wasn't the most peaceful place. And I had a girlfriend at college who was, her father was district commissioner in some spot in East Africa. And they actually saw their cattle knees chopped off here.
Oh.
So it went through a very vicious period.
Right. Yeah.
Which was sad.
So it was a bit unsafe there for a while.
Yes, right. It was.
I've got here one of your, in terms of fondest memories, walking along the cliffs with your dad.
Yes. Cliffs in Cornwall.
Right.
My father was an interesting man with his knowledge of a lot of things. He was an interested man in everything.
Yeah.
He was no pushover, that's for sure, but he was so fair and so knowledgeable about so much. And he was very tall. He was 6'4".
Right.
So we walked, and he wouldn't slow down for me.
Just charge off.
Yes, so we'd go together, both charging at a rate of knots.
So you're just trying to keep up.
And I did. Couldn't possibly be beaten. And he just was the most wonderful companion.
So yeah, you've obviously got really fond memories of your dad.
I adored him. To the extent that I even asked myself once, when my son was born, whom obviously was totally adored, first one, but I think I remember one night thinking, what if I had to choose between the two as to who was to live? And I wouldn't have known.
Right.
Which is unusual. Most women would have chosen son.
So you were that close to your dad?
Yes. I didn't not choose Richard. But as many lunchtimes as I could fit in, I would go and visit. There were several people, elderly, like I am, that didn't get visitors.
Yeah.
So I would just pop in.
This is part of the reason we're doing this as well. There's a company that Connect 40. It says that 40% of people in aged care don't have any visitors. So it's nice to come in and talk to people.
Well, I used to go regularly, and sometimes I was a bit pushed. And I remember this particular day, that was before Manly Hospital was reduced to rubble.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know if it's really worth it and if they really are that bothered about somebody. And when I walked in, this elderly lady saw me and she said, "Oh, look, here she is, our angel."
Well, I think it means a lot more to people than you realise, yeah.
And I had no idea. And the other interesting thing on that sort of line, I had to stop to get the bus stop because I'd bought too much to carry home in Manly. And I got just chatting a bit with this this chap, and his bus came and he said, cheers. He's just getting onto the bus and he stopped and he turned around and he said, lady. I thought, oh, Lordy, what have I done now? He said, I want to say thank you. And I said, oh, he said, I'll tell you why. I was going home to top myself.
That changed it.
Talking to you, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So none of us know how much a little bit of TLC to someone can hit the spot.
Yeah, especially now in this day and age where everyone's so busy and running around a million miles an hour. I think people are less likely to stop and have that interaction with people.
I agree with you. And it's a greedy world.
Everyone's looking down at their phones now.
And they don't seem to have much to spare for someone else. They laugh at me here, a number of girlfriends, because they reckon I've got a fabulous wardrobe, you see, says she in her tracksuit. And how could I? Was I that wealthy? And I said, wealthy? What on earth are you talking about? And what it is, or was, what it still is, my mother was very strict, and a lot of my girlfriends had lots of clothes to wear, but cheap. And so the next year they needed new ones. Mum would make sure that I only had 2 in a year, 2 outfits. And I had to make sure that they would go with what I had last year as well. So I ended up with good designer, good clothes, cutting, the whole bit. But very little, but gradually over a few years, I ended up with clothes that were still smart, still wearable, because of what Mum...
So it was more the quality over the quantity type approach from your mum.
Yes, and it worked.
I think I was the opposite growing up. I think we just got loads of cheap clothes that lasted 5 minutes and that was it. So yeah, I was the opposite. I think.
Most of my friends were.
When was the last time you went back to Cornwall?
It would have been last year. I went,
Yeah.
I was there every year.
Yeah.
Working, but every year.
Yeah, that's good.
And this is, well, I was packed to go back a couple of months ago. And for whatever reason, I fell. And I wasn't like this, old hobble guts. And something, I didn't faint, I didn't hit something, I didn't slip. I just, boom.
Right.
And I've never been out of care since.
Right. So it all came very suddenly.
Oh, totally. And my husband had died about, I don't know, a year, 18 months before. So I was getting used to living on my own and coping and doing, and I like work. So it wasn't difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, it was hard work, but that's not difficult.
So how has it been since you've been living here? What was that transition like, moving into here?
I didn't to begin with, because it was all new and it was another challenge.
Yeah.
But it's not feeling like that now. It's feeling like, oh yeah, I've got one room. Worked hard for this one room. It leaves me a little bit sad.
Do you get involved with the activities and the day trips, that kind of thing?
Here, yes. And they do a number of activities, and so it's for a care home. I haven't got anything to compare it with, but I would say that it's probably pretty okay.
And the staff are good?
Yes.
Look after you?
But it doesn't mean to say it suits you or you like it.
Well, yeah. I don't think most people want to live in an aged care facility, but yeah, if you do, you want it to be a good one, then they look after you. Yeah. I've got something here about your uncle that retired, and there was an old lady from a care home that would help out, do some little jobs. Is that right?
Yes. She was called Sarah, and she was from up country,
Right.
and he took her out from a home to give her something of her own, and he was, I might as well say it, he was chaplain to Her Majesty the Queen.
Right. Wow.
And so Sarah would wait at table, but not for important guests. She wasn't up to that. She wasn't quite there. But this particular day, Unc had died. And we were thinking, what on earth, who's going to tell Sarah? And Tony, who was a friend of the family, said, oh, well, I'd better do it. And he said that, Unc had passed away. And she looked at him and she said, Tony, thanks for telling me, lad. If you don't mind, I can't stay. He'll be needing me now.
Oh.
She got up, went upstairs. Tony rushed to the RN, the registered nurse, to say, look, we don't know what she's going to do. Well, what she did, she got out her Bible, lay on her bed, holding her Bible, and died.
Right.
Well, he'd be needing me now.
Wow.
So she just created her own death. She didn't do anything dramatic.
Just laid there and passed away.
She just lay down.
Wow, that's amazing.
My grandmother did something similar. I think it's Cornish. She'd had some strokes. She couldn't speak with any authority or strength anymore. She had to be really helped to get upstairs and all sorts of things. It was a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And she had 4 children, of which my mother was one. And each family had Nana for 6 months. So she wasn't always getting up and packing and repacking her stuff. It felt like home for her.
Yeah, she had a decent amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this particular day she was at Uncle Rupert's. And luckily for Uncle Rupert, few of us were there. And Nana suddenly said, in a very firm voice, well, everybody, I think it's time I went to bed. See you all in the morning.
Yeah.
She stood up, walked to the stairs, which were steep, climbed the stairs, put on her nightie, lay down, died.
So you think there's something to that? You think?
Well, it's very odd.
Oh, especially that first story you said about Sarah, who just said, you'll be needing
me now.
Yeah. Yeah. You do hear that. You do hear a lot of those stories, don't you? Yeah.
Well, I know Uncle Cyril, the chaplain, he lived in a castle and he had a croquet lawn. And the Archdeacon was, well, you'd think I was an elite athlete if you saw how bad he was.
Right.
Until he was challenged on the croquet lawn. He walked out straight as a die, took his mallet and
It's like he's a different person.
completely.
Yeah.
It didn't last, only when he took up his mallet.
Right.
And I've often been sorely tempted, but possibly too lazy, to do some research into these things, because
Really interesting if you did, yeah.
there's got to be something behind it.
Yeah.
And there are interesting stories too, because you've heard of the Romany gypsies. Have you, the Romanis? Okay, well, they're not gypsies, like Vandals. The Romanis are a true race. And my father was actually, the Romany queen, when she died, they burned the caravan, and the Romanis come from everywhere. And my father was invited as a guest, which is pretty extraordinary. I met one of them once, and it's just so interesting. You know, I'd heard of Romanis, and I knew they weren't vagrants, like gypsies, like vagrants.
Yeah.
But I didn't realise how much was involved with being a Romani.
I've not heard of it. I'll have to go and look into that myself, actually. Yeah.
I mean, they may have, I don't know, they may have gone, I don't know, but when I remember being frightened of them, we were all, maybe frightened was too strong, but very, very respectful. The girlfriend and I, kids, and when we knew that the Romanis were going through the village, we'd go and hide under the bed.
Yeah, right. Had that effect,
So,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, I've looked that up. It'd be interesting to read about that.
Yes.
Well, there must be some stories from your uncle being the Queen's chaplain.
No,
Oh,
because he would never tell any.
so he wouldn't share any stories.
No.
Right. Is that part of the gig, was it? You're not allowed to say anything?
Well, I don't think he was supposed to say anything, but he wouldn't have anyway, because it wouldn't have been very honourable.
Right.
I can say silly things. Like I can remember he rang Frank and I to see if we could come up and assist, because they were too much to have anyone like our Sarah from up country. So we went up and I would hostess. And of course, he had moved into this beautiful place. The bath was total marble, and I could lie flat in it.
Right.
It was huge. So I'm luxuriating. Thinking, oh, this is wonderful. And then Frank said, Sarah, are you coming? You're supposed to be greeting guests and being a hostess. Where are you? Well, I was in the bath.
In the big marble bath.
And all I remember about these important people is not one thing except my hair hadn't dried and I could feel wet running down the back of my neck the whole of the luncheon. So I couldn't remember who it was. Could have been the Prime Minister for all I knew.
Yeah.
It didn't stay, whoever it was, because of that darn wet hair dripping
Too
down.
distracted. Yeah. Huh. Well, what's this story about the porridge?
Oh, I was in trouble for that. Uncle Cyril's brother married this dreadful woman. She was a snob.
This is the auntie. Yeah.
Yes. And Sarah, you know, not full quid Sarah, was waiting at table when we were having breakfast. And Sarah came up to me and she said, Madam, will you have some porridge? And I said, actually, Sarah, I won't have any porridge this morning, thank you. And this dreadful aunt looked and she said, "Not have porridge? I don't believe. Porridge is the stuff of man and beast." So what did I do? Opened my big mouth and said, "Oh, really? And which are you?" And Uncle Cyril, he dropped something, so he had to go under the table. My husband
Why so people couldn't see him laughing?
Well, he laughed under the table. My husband nearly had a stroke trying not to laugh. And I didn't live it down.
Yeah, I bet that was retold for forever, wasn't it, that story?
It went round a bit.
What was your relationship like with your auntie after that?
Well, I don't think we were ever that fond of each other.
Right.
Really.
Hmm.
And I hardly saw her after that. I don't think they got invited when we were there.
Yeah.
Because that was in a place called Rose Castle.
Well, it sounds like you've had quite the life.
It's been full of interesting people,
Sounds like it.
interesting things to do, but then sometimes I feel that I haven't achieved what I want to, because I started law briefly. My mother said, "Women don't have professions." That's enough of that.
Well, put a stop to it. She put a stop to it.
Yeah.
Well.
So I married Frank.
And she put a stop to your modelling career as well, by the looks of it.
Oh, yes. Oh, that was even worse.
So spotted by the BBC.
Yes. And someone from the, what's one of the, not the Telegraph, but one of the
Big
Sunday
papers.
papers, yeah, joined with them and suggested that I could do quite well because of what I must have looked at like then, or else it was the sort of funny face that they needed. And they went to see my mother. You know, it wasn't just, but they had some photographs because I was going out with a guy that knew them, and he took some on the beach, so they took some regardless of my mother.
Right.
And Mum said, "Certainly not."
So why wasn't she happy about that? She didn't think it was the right...
"No, you're studying." And a model? Touch common, isn't it?
Oh, right. Yeah. So that career path was shut down then?
Totally, utterly. But theatre, well, that was also shut down because I adored theatre. Absolutely adored it. And I belonged to the Shakespeare Society. But again, when I was asked if I would trial in London or whatever, no way.
Well, must have been frustrating to have all these different things were shut down.
The worst one was the theatre. I mean, I didn't have to have a glamorous, I mean, I'd have loved it to be centre stage, but I'd have been happy just to wash floors. I loved theatre so much. I just...
Yeah.
And to have that curtailed so smartly. But I suppose, well, I not suppose, I believe that Mum believed she was doing the right thing.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I think that, people just try and do their best, don't they? And if they think they try and do what's right, what they think's right at the time.
I just wish Dad had stepped in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he was such a support and things. And I think it's unkind of me, really, but it has occurred to me that maybe Mum was almost just a little bit jealous because she wasn't as bright as Dad, nor as bright as I, not having myself on, but Mum wasn't quite to that. And I think it irritated her a bit.
Yeah, so maybe there's a little bit of that there.
I think there was a bit. I can't think of any other reason why a mother would not back something that's, wow.
Oh, especially if it was a passion of yours. Yeah.
Yes, which it was totally.
Did something happen? Did someone fall through the ceiling? Did someone go up in the attic?
Yes, my husband.
Right. Do you want to tell us about that?
I had a little house at the beach at Polzeath. Dad was about 12 miles inland, and so we did 2 vegetable gardens for the temperature, well, more the gales as to what went with what. And then we bought a bit more of the property so that Frank and I could have somewhere a bit better to live than little weatherboard place, which was lovely. And Dad and Frank were doing it up. Frank he was a good vet, but he didn't have a clue about anything else. He was going up in the attic with with Dad. Dad said to him, "Be very careful where you're stepping."
Yeah,
really? Well, the next thing was a crash. He hadn't been careful enough. He'd gone straight through the ceiling.
He sat in the living room all of a sudden, was he?
Exactly.
That must have been a great sight. Wasn't hurt though.
No, not seriously. And neither was he, although his pride was more and more hurt. When we had 6 letting places, which I ran those when Frank was veterinary surgeoning. And Mum and I were sitting having a gin and tonic watching the 2 men. They were doing something to improve the steps going up into the larger of the houses and putting a wall there for someone to hold on to. Frank came back to get something, went up, and then suddenly Mum and I realised what he was going to do. He'd forgotten that when you build a wall, you've got to let it dry. So he went to speak to my dad and leaned on the wall. Well, the next thing, he's on the floor of this steps, surrounded by bricks.
Bricks everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere. And Mum and I, when we realised he hadn't killed himself, I don't know why Dad didn't. We just couldn't stop laughing. And it was very difficult to get a straight face by the time Dad helped him down the pathway. Oh, it was a constant, it really was.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm lucky because I had an upbringing with so much love and so much laughter.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, it's great.
It was.
So can I ask a quick question then? If you could go back in time and speak to your 16-year-old self, is there any advice that you would give to a young you?
I think that would be very difficult to answer just like that.
Well, it sounds like you've had a great life, so maybe you just say, do what you
I think
do.
one thing I would pursue my passion if it was really a passion. And I would still, that's one thing that comes to mind, because I'm always sorry because, well, I might as well be up myself now, mightn't I? I actually believe, from what everybody wrote in newspapers and said, that I was very good at theatre.
Yeah.
Probably because I could become the person. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I really could. I could transform myself from Sarah to whoever. And that gave me the chance to do a better job than maybe otherwise.
Yeah, so that's the thing you would have changed if you could. Yeah.
So I think I would want someone in my shoes again to choose a career. It's not going to be bliss all the time, that's life. It's not like that. But I'd like to know that, say my 16-year-old granddaughter now, I would want her, from the bottom of my heart, to find something that she really appreciates learning about, doing, performing, so that she can get some satisfaction out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and just chase it, whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, get you back on for another chat if you're happy to do that in the future. I think there's probably plenty more other things that we could cover.
Well, I'd love to.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for coming on this time. It's been great to chat. It's great, some great stories there.